So these are rainbow carrots.
Yes.
Yes,
Out of
it
one
produces a ton, which is fun. So deer do not like marigolds, and we have a lot of marigolds in here.
Look at those tomatoes down there.
Yeah.
I really have some questions about your journey and how this all came to be. It smells wonderful.
Yeah.
That's great. Hey everybody, welcome to Finding the Upside. Oh my gosh, I am so happy that you chose to join me today. I'm so happy to be with you and bringing you this new transformational episode of Finding the Upside. If you've been watching or listening for a while, you know that normally I'm interviewing guests in my studio. This is the first of many more to come where I am breaking out and getting out into the field. And I'm doing this not only to bring you more exciting content and really bring the stories that I talk about and the guests that I have on to show them in their own space, what they do, highlight their journey, and be able to see them in their own element. But also because of my partnership with Your Home TV, which my podcast and this show streams on, I wanted to be able to up-level and bring you content that's more TV-like and that I'm able to produce in a different way. If you listen, you can still listen on the podcast on any platform that you get via audio, or as always, watch on either YouTube or on Your Home TV. So let me talk about this episode. And I have an incredible guest that I am sharing her story and her mission here on this episode of One Tough Chick, Finding the Upside. Natalie Fockel, she's a friend of mine. She lives in Columbia, Tennessee. And I traveled to Columbia and Franklin, where she shared with me not only her story, but she showed me her mission for gardening. Now, gardening may seem like something old, but I promise you, this is a new and revolutionary technique that she went and got certified, and this is a new way for individuals to be able to garden in their backyard, on their patio, in very small spaces, to be able to produce their own food. What ended up as a mission and actually a business started as a hobby for Natalie. I don't want to give too much up, but I want you to just sit back, relax, as not only Natalie shares her story, but she shows us exactly what she's done, and we're going to see 3 very different gardens, all based on the same technique. I hope you're ready. Let's get into it. So super excited for you to show me.
Yeah, I can't wait to show you what I got back here.
Oh my gosh, it's beautiful.
Thank you.
Wow, it's amazing how many plants you have in there and how much produce. Yes, this is amazing.
Thank
Please
you.
tell me, let's get started. Like, tell me about this bed in particular. I don't even know what I'm looking at. Tell me.
So this bed, we have a combination of leaves, roots, and fruits, which is the technique that I try to incorporate in each of my beds. And the reason for that is what one plant takes from the soil, the other plant replenishes for the soil.
Wow.
So it creates its own little ecosystem. So in this bed, I have a lot of carrots.
That's here?
These are the carrots,
Oh gosh, amazing.
I've got fruiting things right here mixed in, just crammed right in with the carrots.
What
these are tomatoes.
Uh-huh.
So I've got multiple tomato plants in here.
Okay,
And then
you
I've
have
got
some
leaves.
tomatoes.
I've got tomatoes on them, yep. And I have leaves. I've got kale. I've got 2 huge cabbages in here.
Wow.
Got Brussels sprouts, Swiss chard.
Oh my goodness. And basil? Is that basil?
I've got basil, yep. And then some bell peppers over here.
Wow.
And you'll notice I incorporate a lot of herbs around the sides of the beds. Herbs are used to detract pests and add beauty.
Natural pesticide?
It's a natural pesticide, yep. And then the flowers attract the pollinators. So those bring in the bees and the hummingbirds and butterflies. So it's all working together as one ecosystem. Pests also don't like the smell of onions. So in all of my beds, I have chives and onions. And then, you get to produce those, or you get to harvest those. So
now, is the soil in each of the beds exactly the same, or does that vary? It is.
It is. It's exactly the same. Okay. Occasionally, I will add some nitrogen, like some bone meal or blood meal to them to amend if I need to, but it's all a mixture of sand, compost, and topsoil. That blend works really well. That's the blend that I've used in the course that I was certified in. And yeah, it's just creates a really fertile ground.
Well, not only is it beautiful, it's actually the harvest here, it's like you could make your dinner
yes,
out of one bed.
It produces a ton, which is fun. I went around the other day and counted my tomato plants because I lose track, and I have 28 tomato plants in here throughout these beds, and so I'm going to have a lot of tomatoes. I have 12 cucumber plants. I have tons and tons of kale. I've never counted how many onions I have, but I have a ton.
You have a lot. When did you plant this? Did you plant all of these beds at the same time?
Mostly. I did a little bit of succession planting. So I started with this bed, and then maybe 3 days later I planted this bed, and then 3 days later I planted that bed.
But all within the
same couple weeks.
Okay. And that was when we're in Middle Tennessee. So where's that?
I started back in March. So one of the things that I'm doing is called intensive planting.
Okay.
And what that means is it's less seasonal. So I did start out with cool season plants. So in March and April and early May, I had lots of cabbage, lots of broccoli, cauliflower. And then each time I pull something out, I replace it with something that is in season at that time, and I fill the gap. So I will harvest a cabbage, I'll add some mushroom compost to the place I pulled it out, and then I will add a bell pepper there, or I'll add a tomato there, or something else. I'll just replenish right in that spot so that it's always full. It's always growing something and filling it up.
That's amazing. So one of the things that I know is very different about this technique, as you mentioned, is planting so much in a small space, which is very different than, I think you called it square footage.
Yeah, square foot gardening.
Which is what we do at my house.
Yeah.
And what is most traditional. Talk to me about that a little bit. Obviously, I can see the result, but...
Yeah, so I also started by square foot gardening. The first few years I did square foot gardening until I learned this technique. And a little bit more about this technique is Nicole Burke, the one who founded this technique, discovered when she was doing hiking in national parks that, hey, everything is thriving out here in these national parks in the wild, and there's no perfect square foot order in nature. It all just kind of thrives together. And so she thought, I wonder if I could make that work at home. So she started experimenting with it, and sure enough, it does do that. So with square foot gardening, as you know, it's very orderly.
Yep.
You put one tomato per square foot. You put one pepper plant per square foot. Whereas here, I have no idea how much real estate this is taking up, but it's just crammed in here with everything else. And as you can see, I've got tons of tomatoes on them.
Yes.
So her technique breaks all the rules. There are no rules. The best rule is to cram as much as you can into a tight space. And what that does is it reduces your risk of pests. It eliminates a lot of pests. It reduces the amount of watering you need to do. It keeps the soil fertile, and it just causes everything to grow rapidly and produce a lot.
So what's really interesting to me is when I was visiting Napa Valley in the wine country, they talked about they had outside of the grapes lots of flowers and other plants for exactly the same reason, that it would either eliminate pests or it would take something out of the soil that the grapes didn't need, and all of that. So it's reminiscent for me of that. And you're right, like in nature, this is how things grow. But I also, just a couple things here is that you don't need a lot of space to have a big harvest and a lot of vegetables. And I think what's also interesting is how you replace things. And so it's not a plant in May, harvest in August and September, and then that's it.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, the first few years I did square foot gardening, I would go through these seasons of grieving because I'd harvest everything and then my beds would look terrible and sad and depressed and old. And so this technique, I will not have a down season until we get probably into the end of December. And I'll stop for the end of December and probably all of January. And then I will start prepping for cool season plants.
Wow,
so
that is great.
I'll grow at least 10 months out of the year, if not more.
Yeah, and the other thing is too, like, that's always a concern, you know, why a lot of people want to grow their own vegetables is not to have any pesticides used, you know.
Yeah.
My family came from Italy and they followed the old, you know, square foot gardening and some, you know, natural things like putting grass cuttings in the garden. But they still use like Miracle-Gro, you know, like, and the whole point of growing your own is to not get any of that. So this is such a natural, you know, ecosystem, like you said, and a natural technique that I love that.
Yeah, and you'll see in some places it's not perfect.
Yeah.
There are places where I've had, right now we have a lot of June bugs, and so there are Japanese beetles, and they're, you know, munching a little bit. But what's great is I'm producing way more than I'm going to need, so I can share with the Japanese beetles, and eventually they'll leave, and I'll prune those off, and I will get a ton of harvest from there. You can look at my cabbage plants and see a couple little bites in them, but overall they're super healthy. Yeah. And they've been treated with nothing. So
it smells so good too.
Yeah.
Was there anything ready to pick?
I don't know. Let's see if we can pick a carrot. It may be small. Let's see what it's like.
It's okay. Oh God, how beautiful.
So these are rainbow carrots.
Yes.
That's the first carrot of the season.
Wow, so that's a natural baby carrot.
It is. It is.
That is beautiful.
Yeah.
This is the first one you've pulled?
First one.
Wow.
There you go.
Oh, wow, thank you. It smells wonderful.
Yeah.
That's great. So what kind of maintenance do you have to do? You said pruning, or obviously if you're harvesting something, you're going to replant something else, but just the maintenance day to day, every couple days, every week.
Yeah, so because mine are so full, I have a lot of beds to check, but each bed just takes me a couple minutes a day, and I just come out, I look for yellowing leaves, I look for any signs of pests or any signs of unhealth, and I address those in the moment. I'm always pruning, I'm always checking on things. So I spend about between 10 and 15 minutes a day out here looking through the beds and just making sure everything's good, making sure I have enough water. Yeah, and this is my joy place. This is where I get so much joy. This refreshes me. So it is not a chore to come out here and check on my beds.
This is what you love to do. So, and when you say pruning, you're just hand picking like anything that has yellow or what, like, talk to me about that.
Yeah, so a lot of times I don't like things touching the soil, so I like to get heavy leaves or wilting leaves off of the soil. So a lot of times I'll check around my kales, and I can see one over here that would need to get pulled out, and I would just go reach in there and just pull it out. Usually I bring out a garbage bag with me and fill it up with stuff, but
seems pretty simple.
It's easy. Very easy.
So tell me about this bed here.
Yeah, great. So this is my tomato bed primarily. I've got all indeterminate tomatoes that will vine up through over the top.
Oh, wow.
And I also have determinate bush tomatoes here in the middle. So this has...
What does that mean, determinate?
So determinate means it will grow to a determinate length.
Oh, okay.
And indeterminate means it will grow until it runs out of space.
Which is why you have those by the...
Yeah. So determinate is like a bush, and indeterminate is like a vine.
A vine. Okay, that makes sense.
So I've got this trellis to train the tomatoes up. These are my indeterminate tomatoes. And then I've got bush tomatoes here, the determinate ones, that will just kind of bush out, fill up the space. So Romas, San Marzanos, bush steaks, like the big sandwich
ones.
ones. That's what bushes are, or determinate plants are. And then vining tomatoes are like your early girl, your better boy, things like that. I've got bush beans growing in here, and mixed right inside with the bush beans are zinnias. So they're going to come up, and they're going to be, again, another bee attractor and pollinator attractor.
These flowers here, the pink and purple?
The flowers also. These are zinnias here. So they haven't blossomed yet, but they're going to come up. These are bush beans. These are zinnias.
Oh, so you really have them intermingled.
They're just interwoven, yep. So they're all together. Right now I have beets and radishes growing in here as my roots.
Beautiful.
Again, these are my fruiting. The tomatoes are the fruits, and beans are fruits. And then the leaves are more kale.
More kale.
And pretty soon, I will start introducing more arugula and lettuces back in as we inch towards fall.
How many plantings of like lettuce and arugula that like, or quick growers can you do in a season, would you say?
That's a good question. What I would do is keep reseeding. So I would plant and then, reseed every 2 to 3 weeks. So as I take from some, it'll just keep producing. So it's that is actually one of my favorite things to grow is lettuce and arugula and
you probably could
kale.
Get like 6 plantings at least.
Oh, sure.
Of that,
sure,
right? Over a season of planting?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. And this crazy bush with the white flowers, believe it or not, that's cilantro. And it's bolted because it's way too hot for cilantro right now. But what's great about it is I'm letting it flower because that's attracting more pollinators. And it's also going to go to seed, and I'll be able to harvest coriander from it.
Okay, so you purposely are not worried about it flowering because normally when it flowers, you're not able to use the herb.
Yes. Okay. So I'm not going to use it as cilantro, but I am going to pull the coriander seeds from it. And I'm going to allow it to be, it looks beautiful, and it will also attract the right pollinators to the garden.
Beautiful. And you still have chives and onions here?
That's right. Yep.
Awesome.
Every garden, or every bed.
Beautiful. And this is mint?
That's orange mint, yes.
Do you mind if I take
some off and smell it? It's different. Isn't that nice?
Oh, yeah. So tell me about this bed. This is beautiful.
Thank you.
What do we have here?
So fun. So I've got
purple kale.
Huge kale here, purple kale here. This is celery. Let me show you some of this.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Ready to go.
Smells
celery.
So good. That's beautiful.
Lots of Swiss chard here behind the kale. And then purple cabbage down right up along the trellis.
Beautiful.
I'm going with the same exact technique in this bed. So I've got thyme on that side, right there next to the onions.
Oh, down below, yep.
And then on this side, I've got parsley.
Beautiful.
And then in between the cucumbers, I have dill, which also help prevent pests.
Look at the cucumbers.
Yeah.
And these are indeterminate plants.
Those are indeterminate,
right?
That's right,
okay.
Yeah. So they're gonna vine all the way up the trellis. So by the end of the season, I have got cucumbers planted on both sides of the trellis. So by the end of the season, it'll meet up at the middle.
Oh, beautiful.
And it'll be fully covered.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that was planted, your first planting?
No, that's a later one. So I think I planted that sometime between April 15th and May 1st.
Wow, that is
so
awesome.
They've really taken off. Yeah,
it's beautiful.
And this all was early. This was like 1st of April probably.
Wow, that's gorgeous.
Yeah.
So tell me about this bed. You said this is a little bit different. How so?
It is. It has a lot of the same things in it as the other beds we've reviewed, but this one has sweet potatoes in it, which is a really fun one. Sweet potatoes grow out horizontally, and so it really fills in the bed. That's another rooting crop, so we've got that as our root in this bed, whereas previously we talked about carrots, radishes, beets.
Yeah.
And then I've got my bush beans grown right in between them here. And then this one has sunflowers developing. It has zinnias. This one has probably the most amount of flowers incorporated into it. And so this this frame is a little bit of an eyesore. It does serve a purpose, but what I'm using it as right now is to train sunflowers up the sides.
Oh,
so
okay.
in a month or so, there'll be the dwarf teddy bear sunflowers, real full. Yeah, so that's what's different about this bed.
This is beautiful.
I also have purple sage here in the middle. It's a different variety of sage than what I had in the previous beds.
And how long will it take for the sweet potatoes to get to a decent size?
Yeah, those will probably be ready to harvest in August.
And you planted them in March?
I planted those in May.
Oh,
yeah.
That's decent. So why don't we head to the next location?
Awesome.
See the next garden.
Let's do it.
Great. So I'm interested from your perspective. Obviously, people have been gardening for decades, right? Centuries. But there seems to be a renewed or bigger interest in this. And talk to me about that. How do you think that has evolved, and how has it evolved?
Yeah, so I think also back to the pandemic, I think that was not unique to me. A lot of people were looking for new hobbies, looking for a new thing to keep them busy while they were at home. And so a lot of people took up gardening. Also, when there were things missing on the shelves because of supply chain issues, that caused people to think, I'd like to know how to grow things myself and help support myself. So we saw the homesteading movement really take off. We saw people really want to become self-sustainable. People started getting chickens and learning how to do that. A lot of people started gardens. And homesteading is amazing, and it truly is a great movement, but that's not available to everyone. But gardening is. Gardening is accessible to everyone, whether you live in an apartment with a balcony or you have you live on 72 acres, you can garden anywhere. And so I think we wondered if that was going to be just a trend. I certainly thought it was going to be just a trend and we'd see it die off. But each year after year, it just continues to grow. And I don't think this is a trend. I think this is going to be a continued thing. And I think it's a movement.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, I think also homesteading is such a big undertaking, right? But like you said, gardening is available to everyone, and there's lots of people that are searching for, how do I produce my own locally sourced produce, right? Everybody wants to be able to go to that farm that has that, but people are realizing that they can produce it themselves.
Yes.
And with the technique that you use, you can do it in a very small space.
Yeah.
So this is the farm.
It is. Let me show you.
Great.
So this is
beautiful.
A well-maintained garden on 72 acres.
Wow. And this was all built for the purpose of this garden, the fence and all of this.
Yes.
So this is much smaller. I think you said this is a newer planting. Tell me about that.
Yes, so we started planting much later in the season with this one because there was a lot of construction that had to go into building the fence around it to keep deer out. Being on 72 acres, they have a lot more pests or critters that they need to keep out.
Wildlife.
Right? Yep. So we built the fence around it and then had to build the beds and all of that. So yeah, we got a later start on the produce, but in just a few weeks, it'll look just like the last garden we looked at together.
Wow. So you said this was planted later. When about did you plant this?
We planted this about 3 to 4 weeks ago, so late May.
Late May,
yeah.
Early June. Wow, and it already looks great.
Yes, and it will fill in very quickly for sure.
Tell me about this border. It seems to be consistent with the same kind of flowers or different types of flowers, but all the way around. Why?
Yeah, so with each garden I plant, I really try to have either a separate pollinator garden nearby or the beds richly filled with a lot of flowers. So with this one, we made a flower border all the way around the garden, and this is heavily seeded with zinnias. So within a week or so, these will just be popping with color and flowers, and it'll attract all of the pests we actually want.
Got it. Okay, great. I have one other question about the deer. So
yes,
in northern New Jersey where I live, we have to plant everything considering the deer because they eat everything.
Yes.
And so is this the general solution for when there's deer, or are there other ways? There
are other ways, and there are a lot of strategically planted plants in here to help rid deer. So deer do not like marigolds, and we have a lot of marigolds in here. Deer do not like chives and onions, and we have a lot of chives and onions in here. But we put the fence around for great measure because we also have turkeys and other things that could get in.
Okay, got it. So this has been great to see the difference between this one and your house. I know we're going to go to a third location now in downtown Franklin.
That's right.
Okay, well, let's go.
All right.
So tell me about Gardenery and how you found Gardenery, because it sounds like the interest you had, you did on your own first.
Yes.
How did you find the Gardenery company and the technique? And talk to me about that. Explain that a little more.
Yeah. So at my former company that I had worked with for 6.5 years, my boss actually, she knew we share the same love for gardening, and she knew that that was a big passion of mine. And so she actually mentioned or asked me, have you heard of Gardenery? And I hadn't. And so she said, oh, you got to follow this lady. She's crazy. She's on Instagram. Here's her account. She sent me her account, and she said, oh, you're just going to die. She's amazing. And so I started following her account, and then I realized she had a beginner's course for gardening. And I didn't consider myself a beginner gardener, but I was certainly a beginner gardener in her technique because it's very, very different.
It's different, yeah, as you explained.
So I signed up for her beginner course, and I was hooked. It was incredible, and I understood her concepts. I loved that she takes risks. She breaks all the rules. And so I just decided, like, oh man, this is amazing. And I wanted to know what else she had. She does a podcast. She has a bunch of other resources. But her next course up is a certification.
To learn the technique then be able to teach it?
That's right, yeah. To learn her specific technique. And then in her certification class, she teaches people how to start businesses being a garden consultant.
Ah, okay.
So I now have a business teaching people how to use this technique. And with my business, I can design planting plans for them, which is what I did for this client's house that we're at. And I can do the actual planting. I can do maintenance plans. But I can just teach them along the way. I also offer coaching plans. So if people want ongoing coaching, like how do I transition from a spring garden to a summer garden to a fall garden, I can kind of coach them throughout the seasons if they want that.
Interesting. So it sounds like, and tell me if I'm getting this right, it sounds like your hobby and your interest that you said it sparked something in you over the pandemic and fulfilled you in a way, was calming, led you to then really a business.
It did.
And really a way to take that passion and utilize it with this certification and now being a consultant.
Yes.
So I'm excited to see, this looks a little bit different. So I'm excited to see the differences here.
Yeah. So this particular house has a couple of different garden locations. This is their trellising garden over here. And we've got squash and zucchini.
Yes, wow.
We've got pole beans. This is, remember, indeterminate.
Yes, indeterminate, because they'll just go, right?
Yep, so these are gonna vine all the way up.
Oh, and look at those little tomatoes.
Look at these.
Beautiful.
They're just so pretty.
Beautiful.
They've also got larger ones in here. And here's an example of
the basil.
The basil and the tomatoes together, and the marigolds also help protect.
Look at those tomatoes down there.
Yeah.
Those are
they're turning. They're ready. We're getting close.
Beautiful.
Yep. And then
more pole beans.
Different variety of pole beans. So we have a lot of different varieties in here.
Awesome.
And then we've got cucumbers here at the end.
Very good. And that's more Swiss chard there?
Swiss chard. Good.
Awesome.
Very good.
Hey, getting to know that. That's beautiful. And this, I notice, has wood beds.
Yes.
Cedar?
So I believe these are cedar, yes. And these were here before I started the project. So they hired me to design the planting inside of the beds.
Awesome.
And then do the planting.
Awesome.
Yes. Different look, people have different preferences.
Absolutely.
And these are beautiful.
Yeah. So why don't we look at the other garden area?
Okay, great.
So here we are at the second garden bed.
Yes. Again,
I'm interested.
It's wood.
Yes.
Which is a different material. And so we did 4 different varieties of bush beans in this one. Obviously, you can notice the kale at this point.
Okay.
Huge.
Yes.
They love collard greens, so we have collard greens in the front. See if you can remember. Here's a little quiz. What kind of tomatoes are those? Do you think it's determinant or indeterminate?
Those are determinate.
Yay! Bush. So
they're
they'll just
bush, they'll stay.
Yeah, that's right. And then we've got zinnias popping up. You can see in the back. Lots of flowers. And we don't have as many herbs in this one. We do have some, but not as many because they've got a separate herb garden right behind us. And I'll show you that as well.
Okay. And these are different kinds of beans, right? Because these are all beans.
Yeah.
Here.
So since this was new, I wanted them to have variety so we could figure out which ones they love the most.
Oh, I see.
And
purple.
Everyone loves color.
Those are beautiful.
Aren't they fun?
Yes.
So these ones are purple.
These are regular.
These are just green.
Green beans.
Yep.
Awesome.
These are like blue lake bush.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then these are champion beans over here.
Awesome. Awesome.
So they've got a nice variety to choose from.
I do see you have some herbs there, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, that's great. I see there's an irrigation system going through here.
Yeah. So it's very minimally used. It's used about 10 minutes a day. 2 of my gardens that we looked at today had irrigation, and one of them didn't, and they're all producing about the same. So Middle Tennessee gets quite a lot of rain, so that helps as well. But just a little bit of water a day really gets things thriving.
So if you don't have irrigation, it's just with the hose?
Just with the
old
hose.
School?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, like my grandfather, gotta water the tomatoes.
That's right.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
So this has been amazing. I really have some questions about your journey and how this all came to be. Let's take a seat.
Okay.
And have a little conversation about that.
Awesome.
Initially, did you think that you would take this business big and step away from your job that you were working at?
No, in fact, when I initially decided to get certified, I didn't know there would be a business aspect of it, but I was so committed to getting certified in her technique that I was like, yeah, I'm going to push myself. Hey, I can start a business. I can do this. And what I realized more intrinsically is that this gives me more joy and gives me more purpose than anything else I've experienced in my life. This is something that causes me to want to wake up in the morning. And when I talk to people, my enthusiasm about it is contagious. And so it was very clear, I'm supposed to do this. And so the initial idea was not for me to start a business, but I quickly jumped on board, and I'm so thrilled that I did.
Well, you know, on this show, we talk about finding opportunity and you just finding innovative ways to not only live your life, but do business, to operate, change your mindset, all of those things. So I think part of that also is that you were so deeply committed to it that you were open to seeing where it went.
Yeah.
And maybe if you didn't even know where it would go. And I think that's an important aspect that is inspiring to a lot of people who think, God, how could I change what I'm doing? Sometimes just some interest that could possibly then lead you somewhere else, and being open to that is so important. And look where it's kind of taken you. Yeah,
I love that. I think my personality, I am an Enneagram 6. I'm very risk averse most of the time. And I'm probably would not have considered starting a business because I wouldn't have believed in myself, or I would have been so afraid of the risk to take.
It's true for a lot of people.
Okay, good. Yeah. If it hadn't been something that I was so interested in, you know, and so driven, you know, so fueled by. Yeah, I think that's an important aspect of your journey. Yeah.
So I know that, as you said, you were not initially thinking that this would be a business and that it would. And then talk to me about, I know you stepped away originally from your traditional corporate operational role to step out and fully invest in your business. And then there was a unique episode of events that took place. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so late last fall, my husband and I really started dreaming. We went through a life planning process, and we imagined what we wanted our life to look like 10 years from now. And where we really envisioned going was someday opening up a retreat center heavily influenced by garden to table or farm to table dinners, and a ministry aspect along with that. But that really got us setting intentional goals and being on the same page, being aligned about that. And that's when I dove into the certification. So now I am a forever student of this technique. I'm a certified student of this technique. I'm a coach in this technique, just helping spread the word and spread the mission.
Wow. So like thinking you were going to step out of your traditional corporate operational expertise, stepping out of that and then actually aligning both of those things, this passionate, business and hobby and interest, and all of your expertise in the very thing that got you into creating that business. That's amazing. Well, I am of this belief, but there are a lot of people that talk about this, quotes that talk about it, gurus, spiritual people, all types of people that say when you are finally in alignment, things start to come to you that are aligned with that. And it sounds like that is exactly what happened for you.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So we've talked about this interest in producing your own food, homesteading at whatever level. If people are thinking about doing that or thinking, I'd at least like to grow my own food. The farm to table movement has been big for many years.
Right.
People didn't know how to do that or how to create that for themselves. What would be your best advice of first steps to take?
Yeah, I would just say start. It's easy. Just get started. I would recommend picking maybe the best 2 or 3 produce items that you love to eat. Plant something you enjoy eating anyway and grow that. I would also say some quick wins are radishes. Radishes grow and are ready to harvest within like 25 to 28 days.
And super hardy, right?
Super hardy. Easy to grow. It's a great beginner crop. And it's fun because it's so rewarding so quickly. So that's really great. But most people like tomatoes. Tomatoes are really easy to grow. Cucumbers, bell peppers. Just figure out what you love to eat and grow that. Start small. Start with what you can control, and each year you can build on that.
Yeah, and what I love, and we saw in all of the places that we went to in what you showed us, the 3 different gardens, is that you don't need a lot of space, right?
That's right?
And you can produce a tremendous amount of your own food with a small amount of space. So I think that's really good advice.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And it just proves, again, that gardening can be accessible, and real, fresh, homegrown food is accessible anywhere you are.
Yeah. And there's also a lot of places where, in our country, different parts of the country have these food deserts where there's not fresh food available.
Yes.
And there's, in my area in New Jersey, there's a lot of schools that are actually taking steps to teach, even in cities, to teach the kids and create gardens in the schools. Even in New York City, up on the rooftops.
Yes.
Some companies are doing that to support that effort and support people in that interest and helping people have fresh food accessible to them. And I think that this is something that not only changes your own individual family, but as a community and a member of our population, just jumping on that also helps to make that movement grow. Like you said, it's a movement.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. I think it should be a requirement for every school to have a community garden and classes just like home ec, teach them how to source their own food and grow things. So
and in cities, having that support of the schools to do that, and the community support, because obviously there's funding for that. There's fundraising for that. There's all different ways to do that. So I think those are great steps in the right direction for us. And I also think, and I'd love to hear this for you, there's a lot of people who are concerned about what's in our food and how our food is grown. And obviously that's the farm to table movement, right?
Yeah.
Locally sourced, know how it's grown, know what's in it, know what you're putting in your body.
Yeah.
How do you think this supports it? I mean, some of it is obvious, but what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, so a lot of the students that have come through Gardenary and a lot of the clients that have come through Gardenary are people that have either are currently working through a terminal illness or they're in remission from cancer, and they've decided they need to be more in charge of what is going in their mouths. And so a lot of them have decided, you know, the best way to have control over that is to start my own garden. And I just think it's a lot easier than people think it is. It's a lot more satisfying and comforting to know that you know exactly what went on your food before you eat it. And so, yeah, I think we've even heard testimonials about people that who have experienced healing through it, and people that have used it as, this is a little sidetrack, but people who have also used it to help with grief, help with loss.
Using the act of gardening,
you know, to help them through grief and loss, help them out of depression. There's scientific studies about how gardening can help, you know, boost your serotonin levels and all of that.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that a lot of people who came through Gardenery were going through a serious illness. I think also a lot of people are much more aware, and there's more raised awareness about prevention and the things that will prevent those catastrophic, really, illnesses. And a lot of that is where your food comes from and what's in your food. So
that's right.
I love that this supports that, and I love that this provides a way that it's accessible to so many people.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you, Natalie, for joining me, and thank you for all of what you've shown us today.
Yes,
this has been
a
blast.
It has been so much fun.
Thank you so much.
So great.